Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Ahsoka Season 1, Episode 8, the finale. I say Season 1 because it's so clear that there basically has to be a Season 2, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. Like, there's been no real official talk about it, but it is so clear. You know, Sabine and Ahsoka left in that different galaxy on their own, basically, with Balin ready to do some Mortis-related stuff relating to, you know, the Ones, Celestials, the Father, whatever way you want to talk about it. That's a plot point just by itself, not to mention how do they get back. All of that stuff, like, they have to address that, so there's certainly more Ahsoka content to come. Ezra gets back to the actual galaxy with Thrawn undercover and then gets away, so he's back with the New Republic. That's kind of big because now all of a sudden you want to see scenes of Ezra and Hera together, Ezra and Jason. He wants Zeb to make his return because Zeb and Ezra had a good relationship, so we're waiting to see those two kind of reunite, and then just to see what role, what place does Ezra have in the galaxy with what's going on here. Then Thrawn is back. He makes it back to the actual galaxy near Dathomir. What's the plan? Are the Dathomirians like heavily involved in his plan and what he wants to do? Is there an arc about him gaining full control over the Empire remnant? Is that something that's almost just a guarantee? Or is there going to be a little bit of politicking and scheming that's going to have to happen to get him fully in as the official leader of the Empire remnant? Because we know from the Empire meeting that was at the Shadow Council, many are up for the idea of Thrawn reuniting everyone together, but there are some doubts. So how's that going to happen? Because Thrawn typically is not good at politics necessarily. That's his kind of weakness. But might he be more up for it now? Like, we just don't know. There's so much, like, in so many ways, like, the season doesn't resolve anything. It just, everything is left open. And that would kind of, I would say, probably be the main issue with Ahsoka, is that it was a show where I think start to finish, it was probably needlessly cautious with its information on kind of everything. Like, world building I thought was kind of decent, but I still would have preferred more. Character arc and information to help those character arcs would have preferred more. And just more detail kind of across the board. There's a weird sense where they just decided that we're going to have mystery and holding back on why characters are acting the way they are for a very, very long time as being one of the main things that they want to do. And for some people, I think that is a huge frustration for them with this show, that the very approach to storytelling that this show took was not really for them, because the show was way too protective of just telling you what's going on, and everything felt like it had to be a cliffhanger. We have to build to every single reveal, when in so many ways you do just want the show to just give me enough information to have something to go on with these characters. And I'm somewhere kind of in the middle, where like I completely understand that and do agree with it, but I still greatly enjoyed the show and I'm very, very eager to see season 2. But I would definitely hope that season 2 is a little bit better and clearer about what it wants to do. Because, say Ahsoka, main character, name of the show, her arc from episode 1 to now, I don't feel was maybe as clear as it should have been, because in so many ways they never just had a scene where the character really made it clear kind of what her issues are. There's all these doubts about Sabine because of their prior attempt at the master-apprentice dynamic. But apart from once or twice where they talked about it, it's not like we got a flashback to what happened there, and it really feels like we probably should have. Like in this episode, one of the main kind of reveals on that was that what happened between the two of them was that basically Ahsoka left because Sabine was so eager to help when Mandalore was under attack by the Empire that, you know, she was at risk potentially of falling to the dark side. And the implication is obviously that because Ahsoka knows about her master's fall to the dark side and hadn't resolved her issues at this point with that, which we saw this season, she left Sabine's training unfinished to the point where like Sabine had not fulfilled her potential, and so kind of in a way couldn't tap into any power to go to the dark side, and that caused a rift between the two of them, where like Sabine views it as like Ahsoka kind of left and abandoned her, and Ahsoka is just fundamentally worried that Sabine is not cut out for this because of her decision making and her kind of in a way attachments to things. So that's all great, but I wish we were shown some of that. Like, imagine the emotion of that argument that properly caused their breakup the first time. That it's Sabine emotionally, powerfully arguing to Ahsoka, I need to go to Mandalore right now to help my people, my family. And Ahsoka having to be like, no, I'm not going to help you with this at all. And maybe Sabine goes off on her own, and when she comes back, Ahsoka's gone, or whatever way. I think we needed to see some of those, hear some of those lines of dialogue. We needed to see some of those visuals and see the emotion on these characters about what broke them apart in the first place. Now, maybe they'll do that in season 2, now that the two of them are together in a better place. Maybe they can now more openly reflect on what's about to happen, but I feel the placement for it probably should have been at some point during this season, but we just didn't really do it. Instead, there was a lot of, we're not communicating well with each other. Let's just kind of sit in silence, not really knowing what way to talk to each other about. When you kind of feel like some of that time probably could and should have went to actually better developing the dynamic, because they obviously wanted to play on the idea in terms of constructing this arc where they don't overly rely on the fact that you've watched Rebels. You get some slight benefits from context for having watched Rebels and knowing Sabine and Ahsoka better, but fundamentally people who have and haven't seen Rebels, both these groups don't know what happened the first time Sabine and Ahsoka were master and apprentice. And that's what they go on. Like, this is a mystery, what happened, and they kind of went with the idea, here's the resolution to that. It's about the Mandalore kind of incident. And we're playing on the idea of, here is Sabine making a similar kind of rash choice, where Ahsoka potentially would have broken off their dynamic, like in the past, but she kind of doesn't or can't this time out. And in a way, Ahsoka has developed in the background since then with her episode 5 arc, and has come out of this with an acceptance about what happened to her master, and understanding that the fact that he became Vader doesn't fully define him. Anakin Skywalker is not just what he became. He was still Anakin. He was still an excellent master to her who taught her so much. These are both parts of him, but the good parts are just as worth remembering as the bad parts. That sort of idea. So don't be so hyper almost against the idea of Sabine can make a mistake. In a way, accept it, because that's kind of what the whole arc was about. In a way, was like Hu Yang kind of says, she was never going to make any other choice. This was what she was kind of in a way destined to make. That was it not the important thing to get Ezra back, regardless of what else happens. And I think that's kind of the takeaway from Ahsoka. But you would still say that when she came out of that vision, seemingly a kind of, completely changed character, it's Ahsoka the White now, instead of Ahsoka the Grey. Has she particularly evolved as a character? How did they showcase that? And I think you could tell in the acting performance that Rosario Dawson is playing the character a little bit more kind of open, being a little bit more willing to kind of like smile, kind of joke around a little bit more and be that kind of classic Jedi, showing some of the kind of Obi-Wan style humor, a little bit of the Anakin humor, a little bit of the Yoda humor as well, of a kind of master Jedi. And you can kind of see that she's more open to sort of not just shutting down Sabine's more kind of rash, kind of want to kind of always take action. And you can see that there is that growth there. It's just, I wish it was just a little bit clearer, focused, and there were kind of maybe stronger moments that just really showed that growth. And I think that's kind of, in a vacuum, like, that is this show. It's like great ideas, executed good, but maybe not excellent tier. And if it can get that next step and get it from like, this was really good execution, get it to that point, I think we're then in a pretty good spot. And I hope they can do that for season 2, because there is some really, really interesting stuff going on. So plot points, I suppose let's get the villains out of the way. So Thrawn himself, surprisingly, and in a way surprisingly across all of the episodes he's been in this season, hasn't been up to that much. Like, it's clear that he will play a bigger role once he has the Empire under his control. And once he does, that's when we'll see him really, really make his moves. In his initial kind of introductions here in live action, it is mostly getting across he is the calculating character. He is fully aware of, you know, what to do when up against a Jedi opponent who will often have crazy, wild, but spectacularly impressive plans, and how to kind of counter them and not lose all your forces because you've been kind of overwhelmed by like the brazenness of some of these plans. He knows kind of how to counter that and not just sacrifice troops against this kind of main character plot armor type stuff. And so, especially when he finally does talk to Ahsoka over the communicator, I like that he tries to get into her head over the idea of like, I knew your master. I also know basically kind of what he became, and I'm kind of thinking maybe you can go in the same direction. And obviously he doesn't know that effectively Ahsoka has mostly gotten past that because she had her World Between Worlds incident. But he still is saying the right things, trying to kind of plant that seed to get a bit of an edge on her. But otherwise, he's just exceptionally calm. And there's a lot of talk about, you know, okay, he's cautious about like sacrificing people at the wrong moment. But when he does need to sacrifice people to buy time, he will do it. And that even includes sacrificing basically Morgan Elsbeth, of like, you will stay behind to give us the time to get away. Okay, now is the time we'll send the night troopers out. Now is the time to revive them and, you know, waste more of their time. But of course, you know, he's never in like complete control just because they are up against like Force users and it's so difficult to control what they are actually going to do. I still feel with Thrawn like there is a side to his character that is basically, I would say, the depth of his character that they are not presenting just yet. This is very much mostly just the Rebels presentation of him, which is that he is a very strong tactical commander who obviously has big plans and is absolutely capable of being the main kind of villain that will be very difficult to defeat. But if you have read the novels, you know there is more to him than that in terms of what his motivations are. So a lot of times there are scenes here where it's just long live the Empire. And I'm like, okay, I get it. You are loyal to the Empire because you view the Empire as being the system that you need to gain control of to help your people. But I think in terms of his live action presentation, I think I'd be more interested to know like the details of, are they going to attempt to tackle the idea of, you know, what is his species? Chiss. Are they ever going to say anything about that and the fact that people aren't super familiar with them and that is part of his motivation as a character? How did he come to join the Empire and what is he hoping to do in all of this? Because you would say his loyalty necessarily isn't necessarily just to, I am loyal to the Empire and I want to defeat the rebellion. But now that it is a new republic, like in a way, like the Empire lost, there's a new group in control. Thrawn, I wouldn't typically say before this is a character who would immediately be like, oh, I need to change this. He'd almost be like, wait, is the New Republic now the group I need to join up with to support the Chiss? But based on a lot of the stuff about kind of military decommissioning that they're talking about, and the fact that just a lot of the politics and stuff like that is meaning that there isn't really much potentially of a military focus with the New Republic, I'm guessing the Empire is still the ultimate kind of system that he actually wants. But that's what I want more of with the character, is just show me that he is more than just a good tactician. That's what I want from Thrawn going forward. Because even the connection to the Dathomir witches, the Night Sisters, is very interesting, because they haven't truly said why this alliance is really there. Because they have magics and are connected to the Force, they seem to view it as Thrawn is, like, by the threads of fate or whatever, destined, like, if we follow him, our destinies will go in the right direction. And that's why they seem to have a respect for him and are ultimately willing to follow his instructions. Now, they seem to have a deal where the cargo is actually related to the Night Sisters. I'm guessing it is Night Sisters in stasis, or dead Night Sisters that they'll revive. I lean more towards the stasis one, because I think they'll actually want alive Night Sisters, because it seems like the fact that they've come into the new galaxy right next to Dathomir basically, like, in terms of that galaxy, are effectively extinct. Like, all of the Night Sisters were basically wiped out by Grievous in one of the last kind of, like, comics that was, I think, meant to be a Clone Wars arc. I think it's a pretty important comic from what I remember correctly. But this would be a way to repopulate Dathomir with Night Sisters. Now, what that doesn't go into is, of course, why are they leaving their original planet? Is it because they sense their destiny is in the other galaxy, not here? Are they running away from something that they think is going to happen on this planet? And does that relate to what Baylan is trying to do? Again, this is where the show has presented some interesting threads, but hasn't actually expanded on them enough to really dive into in particular. But I like that idea, because of course in this we saw the sort of revived night troopers, the kind of zombie troopers, and that was definitely a cool idea. But is that going to be Thrawn's kind of, like, gimmick throughout this whole kind of remnants of the Empire arc that will end with the Dave Filoni movie in the future? I'm not sure. I almost get the impression that this is just a deal to kind of, in a way, bring the Night Sisters back into play. Some of them will be loyal to Thrawn, but I wouldn't be surprised if once he gains control of the Empire, he leans very much away from what's going on with them, only using them occasionally, and we see what happens. I'm also maybe guessing that might play some sort of a role in explaining further the whole return of Palpatine type thing, but we'll see what the exact idea here is, because, you know, Thrawn's view on Palpatine is also, like, a kind of interesting thing about, like, what exactly does that mean to him. But, you know, interesting stuff on that side of things. Our other villains, so Shin and Baylan. Shin, we get one scene where she goes back to the Raiders, puts her lightsaber in the air, and effectively seems to truly become the leader of those Raiders, that this is where she views herself as being. We know she's been characterized as being ambitious, and so, given that she wasn't taken along with Thrawn and everyone else, leading the sort of remaining species on the planet, or whatever, remaining group on the planet, is the right thing for her, I guess. What exactly she will do after this, I'm not sure. I think the whole purpose, in a way, is almost to present her as being a little bit directionless. She's just been abandoned by everyone all of a sudden. With her, we definitely also need a little bit of a backstory, because based on the timeline and stuff like that, she's clearly an apprentice he has picked up, like, post Fall of the Jedi. What was their whole thing about, and, like, where does she come from? What does she want to accomplish in all of this? She wants ambition, she wants power to a certain degree, but to what end? And then they've already teased the idea that, like, Ahsoka has put her hand out, wanting to try and, I will guide you on the right path. what will eventually force her to maybe go down that path. And it probably would be seeing her master make a big mistake with whatever he's doing and showing his kind of madness in a way over what's happening. And then speaking of Balin, this is super, super interesting stuff here. So everyone was wondering, what's the whole Balin thing about? He's talking about something kind of beyond the ambition of effectively gaining control over the galaxy. He wants to end the cycle of we're in control. No, we're in control. War. Now we're in control. By going back to the beginning somehow, and, you know, it's more than just, you know, ambition and power. It's, you know, something beyond that. But there's a power, something on this island that he's drawn to that others run away from. What is it? And the only scene we get of him in the whole episode is he's on top of a mountain near some statues. And as they pan out, you see one statue is the father. Next to him is the son. And then there is a broken statue on the other side of him, which is obviously, I think, meant to be the daughter. But it's broken off around the head and top of the body. Now, these, of course, are the three Force entities from the Mortis arc of the Clone Wars. Technically, they are called, the Ones, or Celestials. Anchorites, I think they also refer to themselves as, but I think that's less a classification of kind of like what type of being they are, and it's just that as powerful Force entities, they have chosen to become Anchorites by separating themselves from the rest of the galaxy and mostly living by themselves to quote-unquote balance the Force on Mortis. So this is huge because it's the first time in a long time the Mortis stuff is kind of coming back into play, especially in canon, where Rebels has some mentions to it in relation to the World Between Worlds, and in a way it's related to how Ezra got into the World Between Worlds, is that a lot of the markings on the walls had like pictures of the father, the daughter, and the son. Beyond that, Legends does have an old novel series that came out in or around the same time, I believe, as the episodes of the Clone Wars, which were basically like Luke and some of the descendants of all those characters dealing with this crisis surrounding basically the quote-unquote mother character of that group. But directly referencing a lot of this Mortis stuff that we learned about in the Clone Wars. So I'm wondering, like, might they bring some of that stuff into play, and might this be about the mother? Like, what if he releases, like, the mother or something like that? That would be, like, a bit of an interesting plot. But the takeaways, the main takeaways from the Mortis arc are that by the end of that arc, the son, the daughter, and the father are all dead. And Anakin rejects the call to become the new father figure as the balancer of the Force. But the father does end the episode just before he dies, I think, acknowledging that he does believe Anakin will fulfill his destiny, the prophecy of the Chosen One, which at this point has come true. And so it's very interesting that we do get Force Ghost Anakin in this galaxy, on this planet, like in or around the same time as this scene. Does that mean anything? I'm not entirely sure. But there's obviously a connection between these Force entities, the World Between Worlds, and all of these kind of type of things. And that also connects to Balin and his goal to do and accomplish something grand beyond everything else that relates to almost like the origin of like the Force, origin of the world or whatever. And that's just by itself incredibly interesting, because given that these characters aren't around, like I said, there's maybe a chance if they do introduce, I think the character's name is Abeloth, who is the mother character effectively. Are they going to finally address the whole idea of, can people take up the position of the father, the son, or the daughter? And especially with Ahsoka, are they finally going to reveal what the nature of her sort of connection to the daughter actually is? Because one of the things that happens in that episode is that Ahsoka dies and is resurrected by the life force of the daughter. Basically, the daughter gives up her kind of last little bit of life to save Ahsoka. And since that point, there has always been visuals of Ahsoka, and the reason that there's an owl in this episode and other episodes that involve Ahsoka is because the owl is connected to the idea of the daughter. So there's always been some inherent connection with Ahsoka and the daughter, and the whole idea of, you know, there is this destiny connection with Ahsoka. And, you know, in a way, you know, you know, almost the symbolism of three statues, and the only one that's broken is the daughter, and the only one, in a way, that, as far as we know, some of the life force still lives, is the daughter. So that's probably the significance here of, like, if Baylan is trying to do something in relation to these Mortis characters, Ahsoka is the perfect person to deal with this because she has those prior experiences. And I would love it if they referenced this stuff and acknowledged it, because there's always been debate about, like, did the events of Mortis, like, truly happen to those characters? Or was it a combined sort of, like, dream style dynamic that they had? And then, even if it was, that means they still, like, experienced it. It was still a thing that happened to them, even if they physically never went to the planet of Mortis and all of this stuff directly happened to them. In a way, spiritually, it did all happen. What does that mean? Like, will the mystery finally be explained? That's the big thing that's, I think, super, super exciting to see what they do with it. Because this is that deep lore of Star Wars, origin story style stuff, you know, literally, like, Force godlike beings, reference to things called, like, the Ones, Celestials. I'm super eager to see what they exactly do with this, because I think it makes for a pretty interesting plot setup, that they can do this wild stuff in this other galaxy, separate to Thrawn creating the Empire, while still having the characters like Ahsoka and Sabine wanting to get back to the galaxy to deal with Thrawn, but realizing that, no, wait, Baylan is planning to do something that is, like, going to affect the entire universe, potentially the entire galaxy, not just, you know, the idea of, you know, Empire control, who controls the galaxy type thing, but truly, like, he maybe wants to restart the world somehow through whatever, you know, mechanism, in a way, almost like made the father into the father. Because I think there's even stuff like from the original stuff where we don't even know the whole origin story of them. I'm pretty sure the initial details on them is just that we're introduced to them and they're already in their positions effectively. And I think there's some explanation about how some of them got their powers, and, like, one, you get light powers from this kind of specific place, you get dark powers from this specific place. But are we going to reference that stuff is the main kind of question, because I think they had some sort of a concept in those books of almost a separate kind of plane of existence, and this was prior to the World Between Worlds, and might they just explain that away now as being two separate galaxies? Either way, fascinating stuff, and I'm eager to see what they do with it. Obviously, we do have to address the whole idea that Baylan, his actor, died, and season 2 has not been confirmed, so they don't have more footage of this. If they don't recast the character or do their kind of CG live action thing with him, is the arc just done? I think it is so clearly set up, and I think they know what they want to do. I think they just have to recast, and I think it's the right thing to do, because if they have a big arc and this is super, super important, I think you just have to make that decision. It can work. It's worked before. The show I'm watching at the moment, the Wheel of Time, they recast one of the main characters, Matt, from season 1 into season 2, and from what I can tell, most people love the new actor, and it's perfectly fine. You can make this work, and in a way, I think it's just something that, like, you have to do it. And I hope they confirm season 2, and I'd like for them to confirm their plans for this character sooner rather than later, because I think it's a great plot setup, and just the idea of Sabine, Ahsoka, Shin doing something in the background, and Baylan on this planet with some mysteries that can get into witch related stuff, really origin of the kind of galaxy type stuff. That's great to me. What else do we have to talk about? I suppose, yeah, Ezra and Sabine. So with Ezra, we have to address the lightsaber. So I speculated in my last video, like, might they attempt to give Ezra, somehow get him Kanan's lightsaber? And while they didn't directly do that, Ezra does not end up with Kanan's lightsaber. They go in the kind of emotional direction of that, which is that he gets a lightsaber inspired by Kanan's lightsaber. That is as close as possible to giving him Kanan's lightsaber. So what they do here is he makes a new lightsaber with Hu Yang, which makes complete sense because Hu Yang helps all of the Jedi younglings make their lightsaber. So he's an expert on that. It would make sense why he has a lot of parts on the ship. Where the crystal came from, I'm a little bit interested in. That's a little bit of a kind of like, does that make a lot of sense? I'm not entirely sure, but you know, that might come out somewhere else. What exactly the crystal is. Either way, they're in a bit of a hurry. He makes a lightsaber, and so initially what we see is he makes like this section of the lightsaber, like here to here, and he's like, what do I do for the blade emitter? And initially the Hu Yang suggests one thing, but then he's like, no, that's too thin. You know, it feels like a Rebels reference because everyone complained that the blades in Rebels on the lightsabers were too thin. That, I think, is part of what they were referencing there. But Hu Yang then gives him this part. Basically exactly this part. Kanan's blade emitter shroud. And basically tells us the story that there are only 2 copies of this part. The first one was used on Kanan's lightsaber, and here is the replacement one that was there if you ever needed it. You now get this. And I think it's the perfect way to do this. Because again, the whole thing with the lightsabers is Ezra gave Sabine his green lightsaber. She has now modified that to make it hers. Interestingly, it's also the emitter shroud that is the main modification for Sabine's lightsaber versus the original version with Ezra. He just had the kind of normal one without any sort of a like shroud on it, and then she's just added like a double kind of like relatively big shroud onto it, kind of like Cal's from the Jedi Fallen Order. So that's a fun thing. But the emotional thing here being, of course, the reason he didn't take back the green lightsaber is because he had truly given it to her and she's now modified it. It's hers. He needs a new lightsaber. And I think for him, it makes so much sense to get one that is inspired by Kanan. Go back to the blue, have kind of his signature part, Kanan's signature part, the notable kind of like dish kind of bit here and then the shroud here. And especially because Kanan's lightsaber came apart, like he basically put 2 parts together a lot of the times and how he kind of wore it. So that's very cool. And it makes sense because he is now the character who is back with Hera and Jason. So that lightsaber now makes a lot of sense because you have Kanan's apprentice back with Hera. He now can, I suppose, maybe train Jason, because that was a plot point that was sort of set up and we were wondering, might Ahsoka get around to that? But because we get the reveal that Sabine is Force sensitive, they're definitely going with Ahsoka and Sabine as master and apprentice, meaning they basically, I think, have to go for probably Ezra training Jason, which makes a lot of sense. So that's going to be cool to see the lightsaber, especially like Jason's reaction to it. If Hera recognizes the specifics, is very cool. And then now that Ezra and Sabine have been separated again, it makes so much sense that the lightsaber, which was always something that she remembered him by, is now even more. Now that she knows it is truly hers, she's reunited with him again. She's saved him, got him back home. But she still has that lightsaber that reminds her of him. That's all really good. I love how they've done that kind of transfer of lightsabers and stuff like that. The only thing, like I said, is I wish they'd explained the blue crystal in Ezra's new lightsaber. Like, where is it from? Is it just a random one that Hu Yang happened to have? Does Ahsoka just happen to have a bunch of crystals lying around in case lightsabers get destroyed, which would be an interesting thing, obviously, in an era where like the Jedi don't maybe have as much support. That's an interesting concept. So that's all cool. I even just like them talking to Hu Yang, I thought was great. Really, really good stuff of them finally, Ezra and Sabine both realizing like just how old Hu Yang is, saying stuff like it like when I say I've been doing this for a long time, I don't just mean that like I'm just over 100 years old and have helped a couple of generations of people make lightsabers. I mean, when I say every Jedi, I do basically mean every Jedi. I even helped Caleb, to make his lightsaber. And that's what really gets it in their heads that like, oh, whoa, how old are you? And it made it really funny, of course, the arguments about the actual construction of the lightsaber, because you have the like Hu Yang, who has the system. He knows how to do this over eons, basically. Whereas Ezra, of course, is very much a just kind of mash a bunch of stuff together. I would have loved to have seen Hu Yang's reaction to Ezra's first lightsaber, the thing with the blaster on the front that looks like a block. I don't think he would have approved of that at all, but it was a fun, perfect like Ezra scene for him to be that way. Similarly, him walking off the ship when he lands next to Hera, and he's in full stormtrooper gear. He doesn't walk off like with the helmet off or anything like that. That's perfect Ezra as well, based on like how he would act in Rebels. And I like that Chopper can sense it's him even without seeing his face. And it was just a really strong scene to have him return. And it's going to be super interesting to see like what role he now takes up. Of like, I assume he can relay like, this is where I was all of this time. I hyperspaced away with Thrawn. You all know that that is a fact of what happened. I am back. I can confirm that Thrawn is still alive, because I was out there all this time. He was there all this time. I came here on his ship. He is back. There's no debating that. But the question is now going to be, how much support, how organized will the New Republic get to counter the return of Thrawn? Will they treat this seriously enough? Or will they just be like, we don't see anything happening, and they'll actually almost give Thrawn the time he needs to reunite the Empire, and it's going to make it even tougher for them? That's the kind of big question here. So that's probably where the benefit of like Hera not getting court-martialed is, that she's ready to go. Ezra's now back with some of the actual true information, and while they've quote-unquote lost Sabine and Ezra, and Ahsoka, they know what to do. They kind of have the information that they need. And there's also maybe the other factor of just like this, like a few people made this decision and now Thrawn is back. There might be blame assigned because of that, and you know they've assisted Thrawn in coming back basically. But they have to deal with it now. That's the big thing. And how's that actually going to happen? Because the New Republic has been utterly incompetent, like as far as we've been shown in nearly every regard so far. Now is the time to see if there's anything to them. Obviously, I think one of the first things they probably are going to do next season is probably have Zeb return, because Zeb and Ezra is going to be a really fun dynamic to see in live action. Then we get into Sabine. And the main thing with Sabine in this episode definitely is she has a big choice to make, but she is revealed to be Force sensitive. So very cool that we finally get that reveal. I was wondering, like, are they going to do this or not? And I think they could have gone either way. They obviously have made the decision she is Force sensitive. She can do it. What exactly that means based on what they said about her before, I'm not really sure. Because obviously they got around it by saying just like, you are the least talented apprentice I've ever seen. Whatever that really means. Because they weren't quite saying you have a low midichlorian count. They're just saying you don't seem to have a talent for this, and whatever that means. Was it just a thing where it was difficult for her to unlock her potential, but she actually had a decent potential? Is that what they're going for? Seems to be that way. That she had a lot of issues kind of standing in the way of her being at peace enough to a certain degree to use the Force, but once she gets to that point, she's able to do some pretty impressive things. once again, they've done it in a way where, yes, she probably perhaps does a little bit too much with the Force too soon. And I don't think you needed to do it that way. I think her pulling the lightsaber into her hand and it being super clear she did that on her own is enough, basically, on its own, combined with maybe some of the little Force sense things that she does right at the end. I think the Force push assist on the Force jump was probably maybe a little bit of a step too far, in that I think you just could have had that scene played out slightly differently and not needed to have another showcase of her using the Force. But the reveal happens, and so it's a confidence booster for Sabine. She now is going to believe she truly can be a Jedi apprentice. She's going to now, I guess, train to properly use the Force better, more effectively, and it's going to then go on and assist her in her lightsaber fighting. Because I like that throughout a lot of the action in this episode, they really highlighted that she's not used to kind of fighting using the Force to help her at this point. She's doing a little bit of blaster deflection, but Ahsoka is even like warning her of like, whoa, don't, you can't do it in the same way that me and Ezra can just yet. You stay in the back with blasters and use the lightsaber when you have to. And I like them kind of at least acknowledging that yeah, if you're not super skilled with lightsaber, blaster deflection is not going to be the absolute most incredible thing you're going to be good at just yet. But she can get to that point. Like, if she gets enough training, which we assume she'll be in this galaxy long enough to get all the training she needs from Ahsoka, Sabine is just going to grow and grow in strength going forward. Now, you do wonder, like, how much at this point is she going to then use her Jedi stuff in combination with her Mandalorian stuff, when now she can actually do pretty much anything a Jedi can with enough training. That's going to be an interesting thing to see. I don't think she's going to fully abandon all Mandalorian kind of aspects of herself. But that's probably where we do need to maybe address stuff from the past about, they did bring up the whole idea that the initial breakup of this Master-Apprentice dynamic was because Sabine wanting to help her family when the Empire came after Mandalore, and Ahsoka leaving because she was worried about what that would do to a Sabine who now has powers effectively, and regards to, I suppose, balance of the Force. So that's an interesting one. The big decision that she has to make, of course, is Ezra gets over to Thrawn's Star Destroyer right as it's about to hyperspace away. She then has the choice: do I jump over as well, join Ezra, but effectively leave Ahsoka to be captured or likely killed, because she wasn't going to get out of that situation on her own? Or do I go back and save my master and do that? She decides to stay behind, because she's in a way doing what she promised to do. I will get Ezra home. Yes, she kind of wants to kind of be around him more. She'd prefer perhaps if they could all stay together, but she's kind of aware he needs to get home. I think we need to send someone on our side back with Thrawn to get word back. I need to save Ahsoka, because in a way, I need to save this relationship, this friendship, this master-apprentice dynamic. And it was the complete right thing to do, because now going into season 2, that relationship is actually going to be in a really interesting spot, where Ahsoka, I think, is in a better mind space to be the right teacher that Sabine needs. And Sabine now having the confidence from having used the Force, and in a way, Ahsoka doesn't hate her decision to do this. There's an understanding between the two of them. And in a way, she's now got that kind of, I need to do this crazy thing to save my friend, is out of her system. Now they can both work together to solve whatever crisis is about to happen on this planet, and then solve the issue of how do we get back to that galaxy. That's something they can work on together and just get to where they need to together. And that's, I think, pretty strong. So it's a weird one, I think, for like the overall kind of like Ahsoka kind of season of like, I don't think the character writing was firing on all cylinders for the entire season. But there's some connections and ideas and arcs that are clearly here that if they can just do a little bit more with it, if the writing can just be a little bit more directed, better, maybe them realize when they do need to show a flashback scene and incorporate that in a little bit more. All of that stuff I think could work together super nicely to really make this something special. It's already really good because if you're a Rebels fan, you've already been loving, I think, everything that's been going on. But for maybe the people who haven't seen Rebels, probably need a little bit more than has been presented so far. So, other than that, what else is there to talk about in this episode? The zombie troopers and the whole Night Sisters revive them, that was fine. Obviously, the obvious solution would be, if the characters are using lightsabers, cut off their legs. They didn't, I guess, want to do mass dismemberment, even though it was the solution to the problem. I get that. I really do get that, because they don't want to suddenly make the rating go kind of through the roof because limbs are being cut off like nobody's business. Like, Star Wars can get away with a little bit of that, even become known for it to a certain extent, but I think it would have been a bit much to see like 3 characters with lightsabers there just carving their way through stormtroopers and just like obliterating them. That probably would have been a bit overkill. So I do get that. We did see eventually, was it Ezra, I think, took one of the main kind of Night Trooper guy's head off. Did we see any other dismemberment? I'm not really sure. I probably have to watch it again. But in general, I thought most of the action was actually pretty good. Like, we did get Ahsoka versus Morgan Elsbeth, enhanced with the Night Sister kind of magic. I'm not sure what exactly the details were there. I guess she's made into like a true Night Sister now because she was given the kind of like the shadow thing or whatever. Then they gave her the special blade of Talzin, which is interesting because they're great mothers. And then Talzin is just Mother Talzin, the quote-unquote leader of the Night Sisters. So that blade being the blade of Talzin almost implies Talzin is above them, but they're great mothers. That's a little bit of a weird one to me. Again, I think more history on them is definitely something that I would like to know about. But still, it was cool to have this magic infused weapon to allow this rematch to happen. Eventually, Ahsoka does beat Morgan Elsbeth, but does lose a lightsaber in the process. Her smaller lightsaber is cut in half, so she's left with just her main lightsaber. Now, as we seem to know, I'm guessing there probably is another lightsaber crystal around. She could get another lightsaber. I think Ahsoka is known for having 2 lightsabers. Might she now switch to only 1? Hard to say. But we know from the Ahsoka the White situation that she is probably going to get that staff that she's shown holding at the end of Rebels. What it is, we don't know. Is it an artifact that relates to her having the life force of the daughter? Something like that. Not really sure, but it seems to be something that comes later. Because I believe Dave Filoni at one point did mention that. No. Like, the staff is not just some random thing. It actually does have some meaning to it, but he wasn't willing to say what it really was. So, that could be like a replacement weapon or object that she gets at a later point. At least she still has 1 lightsaber. Because she did say to Sabine in this episode that, like, was it being a Jedi is not just about like swinging a lightsaber around. So, that's the point there. So her loss of 1 lightsaber isn't the biggest thing in the world, but some nice action here, and the same for like everyone, like Ezra, Sabine, Ahsoka, all got some nice kind of moments to show off their skills, and I definitely appreciate Ezra getting the lightsaber, and that they're not really there was no commitment made to, oh, I'm Ezra, I only fight using the Force now. No, it was just making sure that like Sabine keeps her lightsaber. That was all that was about. So yeah, that has been the review for, I guess, both the episode 8 and some of my thoughts overall on the season. I won't be doing a separate video to talk overall about the season. I think I covered all my thoughts that I really want to get into here. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.